welcome to the St. Pete by Night Twitch channel where we play St. Petersburg by Night, a massive multiplayer 5th edition World of Darkness Chronicle set in the city of St. Petersburg, Florida. My name is Kent, also known as Mishikent. I am the lead storyteller of St. Pete by Night, but tonight I get to play the role of host again because it's Saturday night and that is time for After Dark. After Dark is our behind the scenes show where we talk to players, we talk to storytellers, we talk to artisans who create things like dice and artwork, and we talk to movers and shakers within the world of darkness. And I'm very, very pleased to be joined by one of those, in my opinion, movers and shakers, a creator of fantastic content that you may or may not know. But all the way from Denmark, here on After Dark, we have the SanguineWizard. Now, this fantastic individual was willing to join us tonight, so this is a pre-recorded interview. So by the time you're seeing this, this will have all been wrapped up. So unlike our usual episodes of After Dark, we won't be able to take any live questions from the chat. But I don't think we would even need to do that because there's so much I want to talk to this individual about. Previous campaigns, upcoming campaigns. There's so much we have to talk about. But before that, let's go ahead and let our amazing guests introduce themselves. Go ahead.
Hi, thank you. I feel very praised right now. A lot of good words here. I'm Christopher, also known as the SanguineWizard on YouTube and just in gaming in general. And I run a London by Night show
You run
currently.
several London by Night shows because you have taken on the mammoth task of not just running kind of the Fall of London setting, but doing so from an Anarch perspective, doing so from a Camarilla perspective, and as far as I know, doing so from an Autarchist perspective as well. So that's effectively 3 different groups. What made you decide to choose the Fall of London setting or the London setting as a whole and to run it from those different perspectives?
It's okay. I'll shorten this as much as I can because it's a long but and also kind of sad story. But when I first began V5, I had no idea. I knew about lore. I was heavy on vampire lore ever since Bloodlines came out. But I never had the opportunity to play anything but AD&D. And I wanted to play in London. I knew nothing about the Mithras events and all that, so I asked, where do you ask people? You ask on Reddit, and people recommend things. And I bought the Fall of London book to gain inspiration, and found a group of players in my hometown. Most of them are friends already, and we ran the campaign. I changed. I want to say I changed a lot of things because the book was written in a way that I don't think was well suited for at least my players. So we had my friend who played a Banu Hakim, who would later become the Vizier of Mithras in my chronicle, and then a Bruja Inquisitor from the Spanish Inquisition, or well, as vampires know it, the Inquisition.
Right.
And he became the Brugorl, kind of. He's that warrior of the group because he ate a gargoyle, unfortunately, and inherited the curse. And then we had the Spy Master, the Nosferatu, was also very prominent in my stories. And those 3 kind of ran the Fall of London and set the entire world for me. They decided everything. I'm their choices. They carried over into the Camarilla story, where my YouTube group kind of picked up from, and my real life group, or whatever you want to call it, they still run Mithras in the background. So whatever they do, I kind of pull in to
So
the
you
other
do have
stories.
some kind of impact from the groups on one another.
Yeah.
That's
Obviously, the players must always be, I don't want to say the heroes, but they must succeed. So I will always make the players look good,
right.
or at least try to.
That's such a fantastic task, though, because here on St. Pete, we have all these groups running, and we try to orchestrate a concurrent world where the groups are kind of battling for power, and there's impact felt across the scale. And I have multiple storytellers to assist me in doing that, whereas you're just orchestrating and balancing all of this yourself, and that's an incredible undertaking. But I do love that you make sure that the characters' actions have weight, and that they do have, that they are going to figure prominently into the story, that it isn't what a lot of people label as NPC theater or SPC theater, where you're just watching these SPCs make all the cool actions happen and make, all the big moves. No, the players are getting to make the big moves, and that's, I think, why a lot of people get into role playing, is to feel that significance and to feel that kind of power in what
Hmm.
they do and how they behave, and that they actually can impact the story. That it is their story, and it's not a story that they're just simply watching.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah. I mean, SPCs is supposed to kind of maybe nudge players, or if there's a very difficult problem, you can kind of pay with boons or whatever, and draw them into the story that way. And they might be super fucking powerful, and but you will owe them.
yeah.
It's like owing an elder, and they will solve your problem, but there's the shame that follows with not solving your shit as a vampire.
Well, and that's what SPCs are supposed to do. They're supposed to figure as props effectively in the storyline that help influence the drama and the action and consequences and everything like that. But at the end of the day, they're still props. The
Yeah.
players are the main focus and should be the main focus. And I want to get more into your thoughts and your kind of philosophies about storytelling, but let's take it back, way back to the beginning. How did you discover TTRPGs, and did you have any preconceived notions about them before you got into actually participating in it? Like, had you heard about them but not weren't really interested, and then eventually discovered it? When did it enter into your life? Just TTRPGs in general. So you had mentioned AD&D. When did that start in your life?
I had no idea when I started. I was 10 years old. A guy who I still play with to this day, he started a kind of club in the town that I lived in when I was a child, and various of well, children would join and play, and I loved it. It's just like from the moment I like the being another character as far from yourself as possible. Like 80% of my characters, for example, are women.
Yeah.
Just for reasons I don't know, but I always tend to play women when I at least play fantasy. And playing elves and orcs and all that, I just loved it. That you could, that form of escapism was
Yep.
unknown to me at that point. It was all Nintendo 65 and Game Boys and all that, but this was more, it was free. I kept playing in that club, and it was kind of a thing where our parents had to pay for us to participate. But at some point, I can't remember when, but I started GMing myself. I think it was a teen, 13, 14 maybe.
Well, and so
And
this was an organized club and activity that, like, everyone in the
kind
village
of
knew
kind of
about
like
and everything.
going to
Okay.
badminton or whatever. It's like
Sure.
yeah.
That's
Uh,
that's amazing. Uh, do you remember anything about the first campaign you played in? Like what class you played? Anything about your character? Anything about the story? I'd love to hear it.
it was very brief. Again, I was 10 years old. Keep this in mind.
Absolutely. No shame for a first time.
I played a rogue. I think I was human or half elf. I can't remember. I was a female, and I'm looking for the character name, but that has gone, unfortunately.
No, understandable.
I think that I don't remember what we're supposed to do, but I remember what I did. I broke into the jeweler store, of course.
Of course.
I botched all my rolls, because so that went horribly. I ran with the loot and into a forest, I think, and I did the I'm trying to be sneaky and give this shit to my next characters. I remember something about throwing it at the party and give this to my sister or some shit. Which of course never works because GMs are smarter than that.
Right. Right.
Ran into the forest, got assaulted by a couple of things. But eventually, the rest of them found me, and one of the players, he wanted to punish me or something for stealing, and I'd been praying, I think, to mask the entire time in the forest, and he showed up and backstabbed that player, but he also demanded a sacrifice from me. But that character was very short-lived. Let's just say that I ended horribly and tragically.
But it sounds like you learned some really important lessons about the TTRPG or the storytelling process, even in that first campaign, with there being, consequences, the rolls, results of dice rolls, the fact that you can get into those kind of bargains and dealings. And we were talking about that just a moment ago with the SPCs about how they do play an important role in
Yeah, yeah.
furthering that story by creating events like that. So it started off pretty early. It wasn't your traditional dungeon crawl with, you beat all the monsters, you get the treasure at the end, and it's over. No, it sounded like you got thrown into the deep end of the pool of like, okay, you are following your own path, but there are consequences, and like you can end up being owing a debt to a god or something like that. And that's really really cool and a very cool lesson to get that early. I love your approach into the TTRPG atmosphere because really, if you think about it at its simplest form, TTRPGs are just playing make believe, and that's something we all did. It's if you had an imagination as a kid, I'm not sure about kids born these days anymore, where it's a lot more devices and everything like that, but we all did the thing where we played out in the snow pretending we were on the frozen planet of Hoth and we were in Star Wars or anything like that. I think we all had experience with that, and some people come from theater backgrounds, some people come from started when they were kids, but it really does tap into this primal instinct or ability that we had ever since we were children. And I think that it's very cool that we can still enjoy that mystery, that escapism, that fun element, that creativity all these years later through a more controlled, augmented or detailed atmosphere that TTRPGs provide. um so what are your
Definitely.
thoughts on that? I'd love to hear what you think about that.
I mean, definitely. I'm a '90s kid, so I kind of grew up with entertainment was very much filling in the blanks, which is good for the imaginations. Games were very different. Storytelling were very different. There was a lot unsaid. Um, and I mean, I think I'm terrible at acting in a stage kind of way
Right.
because I
You're
cannot
using someone
like
else's words.
I cannot break character.
Right.
And I get like stage fright. It's the same with I laughed for many years as well when I was a teenager, but I could never take it serious. I just wanted to fight. But when I'm in front of someone and I have to stay in character, like I start giggling and all that. And I think the good thing with TTRPGs at least is like you can have that laugh and then you just kind of break and then you continue.
Yeah, you get to live a little bit in both worlds where you can still enjoy the out of game entertainment about it while still having those in game moments. And if you need to
Yeah, yeah,
pause it or break it for a moment, you're able to do that before picking up and resuming it. And everybody's in on the joke.
yeah, yeah,
Everybody's
yeah.
in on, what's happening.
I
So
think that it's also good, especially with vampire, to kind of laugh about some of the obscene shit that goes on. I mean, it's
well,
horrible, and you
it's a
shouldn't be
dark,
laughing, but
yeah,
yeah,
it's a dark and heavy game. So having that release valve of being able to like laugh at it or poke fun at it or at least step back from it and examine it from an outsider's perspective before diving back in,
mm,
it keeps you grounded and it keeps you aware of what it is you're getting into and what you're going through. So I agree completely. Being able to just keep one foot out, one foot in so that
I
you can,
th-
yeah.
I think it can be. I don't want to say dangerous, but it can be at least a little bit harmful to immerse yourself too much. I have watched some shows and they're very good actors or something like that, or they get very immersed in their character where to the point where they can cry or like the storyteller has to do was it like the table check thing
Yep. The
and I
chess.
th-
Yep.
and I think then you have taken it too far I understand if some people enjoy watching that or creating that, but for me, that would be kind of almost, it's not traumatizing, but it would be unsettling to me. And then when I watch it, I feel like shutting that kind of video down because it's like, I don't feel good. And then I
Yeah,
think it's okay to sit for a moment and you're like, and there's tense and there's drama, but then 5 minutes later, people are laughing, and then you remember, okay, we're playing a game.
right, right. When
Yeah.
people get really, really into it and they have to bring in things like X cards and safety tools and that
Yeah.
kind of stuff, it can be a little scary when those kind of moments come into play. I'm glad that those things exist. You know,
Yeah. Yeah.
everybody
Yeah.
has their own experience, but I agree with you that like if you can't keep a foot out, it gets a little bit scarier and a little bit more intense in those moments and can make a very, very uncomfortable moment happen when
Mm.
those things come up. So that makes sense. And especially with a game like Vampire the Masquerade or The World of Darkness, there have been documented incidents in history of it bleeding over into people's real lives and causing them to do horrific things and barbaric things because they weren't able to disconnect. And it's not to the level of like the satanic panic of D&D of the
Yeah.
70s, but I mean there were some incidences where it crossed the line and it got World of Darkness and Vampire the Masquerade specifically a pretty bad reputation among LARP communities and some tabletop communities for a
Mm.
while in the late 90s, early 2000s. So there's proof to what you're saying is like if you can't separate, if you can't, balance that, it can become really intense or really problematic.
I
So I'm
mean,
glad.
it's
Yeah,
it's ultimately a game, and it shouldn't be harmful, or it shouldn't have any negative effect on you, I think. And in Vampire, the game is mechanically made for me to make your character do horrible shit,
yep,
and you have to be able to take that and kind of laugh about
yeah,
it, because that's the ultimate goal of the beast, right? I think it's very important. It's one of my questions. It's the reason I interview people, is to figure out the maturity and if they can not only handle all the dark shit. I mean, everyone has a thing they
yeah,
they cannot tolerate, and I will respect that, and I will not put it in the story.
for sure.
Um, but I think you kind of have to. I need to feel people where they are in their lives and if they can separate, because I think it can be. Some people don't like losing,
Yeah.
and the best moments in Vampire are when things go very wrong.
Well, and I was gonna say that as well. World of Darkness stories, whether it's hunter, vampire, werewolf, any of them, they're all tragedies. The
Mm.
stories are tragedies, and the game that you're playing is delaying that tragedy as long as possible or making the most of the time you have before the inevitable tragedy hits, whether a vampire succumbs to the beast eventually and, loses everything, or a werewolf, ends up going into Hoglosk or Harano. Like they're all tragic stories. Hunters are going to die in Hunter. Like it's going to happen. It's what can they get done before that happens. So I think that a lot of people get excited at the idea of, oh, I get to play a monster. It's going to be a lot of fun. But with the game itself, it's written in. You have a dark, tragic fate ahead of you, and it's the rare exception that doesn't end that way. And maybe you get a story where that happens and you are able to make it out unscathed or whatever the case may be. But in the
That's
long run,
not that's
yeah,
not always a good thing. I played
no,
a Honda game once when it came out. I was the only one who survived, and my story was the most tragic one.
yep, yep, absolutely. Walking
Sometimes
away with all the
death is
trauma.
better.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
um,
So yeah, so let's talk about when you discovered the World of Darkness. So you were playing AD&D. You, I assume, were living in Denmark at the time that you did find out about or learn about World of Darkness. How did that enter into your gaming, rituals or traditions? When did you discover the game? Had you heard anything about it beforehand? How did you come across it?
I mean, it was way back in the day, and the internet was a different thing. So no, I had not heard about. I had no source to figure these things out. We didn't have Facebook or anything like that to
Mhm.
kind of tell us what was coming out. We had game magazines and all that, but I have always loved anything supernatural, particularly vampires. I've always been fascinated with it. Dracula, obviously the first Bram
Right.
Stoker's, and I anything with vampires or werewolves or whatever, I would pick up. And I just randomly walked into I don't know what would be the equivalent in America, but kind of like they sell appliances and games, and these stores don't exist anymore,
Not really, not as
unfortunately.
much as
Not
they
really.
used to.
Um, because Amazon. So, but I just walked in there. I saw, I think, Jeanette on the cover. It was a DVD or like a game disc, the whole. And it's like there's a vampire. It even says Vampire the Masquerade, and then it's like I need this in my life, and I think I have completed that game like 35 times or something.
Sure.
But it was all I played. Um, I think it was somewhere in between World of Warcraft expansions, so I had a lot of time.
Yeah. Nope.
I think
That's
I think it
pretty.
was 13, 14, something around there, and then I found the books, but they're really expensive when you're a child, so I never bought them
Right.
until fifth, where it's like, okay, now's the time.
Yeah,
Now's
a lot of people learned about World of Darkness through the video games. So
yeah,
Bloodlines, the one of the best
Redemption.
RPG games, Redemption. Yep. Uh, those are great access points where people first discover World of Darkness, and then they're surprised to learn or delighted to learn that there is a role playing game associated with it, which it spawns from, and that's become a lot of people's access points. So you started with the video game, but then moved on to the game itself. How did you eventually actually get your hands on the book and start to learn about the system? And did you just were you running from the get go, or were you able to play in a game before running?
I bought the core book. Uh, I was confused about a lot of things. Again, I came from AD&D.
Right.
Vampire is so weird
So
when you're
different.
used to it's
Yeah.
it, like you're sitting there, ambition, desire. What the why do I have to? It's touchstone. What? Uh, and again, went to Reddit. Reddit people are angry. Don't do that. I almost got turned off the game because of the community on Reddit. People were almost abusing me for my questions. I don't
Yeah.
want to use that word lightly, but it was a horrible experience.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
instead, I went on the Discord server, World of Darkness. They have the I'm looking for games thing, and I found a guy in Britain, a close friend of mine, makes another show eventually, and he invited me to play a one shot where I played a Bruja detective, my first character, and just for like I think it was 3 sessions. So it was a very brief story, but that was kind of introducing me to actually playing the game. I mean, mechanically, I understood it. I'm the kind of guy who, when I get a system, I break it
For
just to
sure.
figure out how my players are going to try to cheat me.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes
so,
sense.
so, so it's
So,
like, sorry, go ahead.
oh, so you got into Vampire the Masquerade with fifth edition then? You
Yeah.
didn't do 20th anniversary or any of the editions before that. Fifth edition was your first entrance. That's such a tough place if you don't have the right atmosphere to get involved with it, because you're right, the edition wars about fifth edition versus 20th versus the original editions. It can be a very toxic atmosphere, undoubtedly. There are some diehards that live and die by 20th anniversary, and I don't hold any qualms against them for that. I started with the older editions. Fifth edition was fairly new to me. I first learned about it when I started this server.
I
But
mean, I get it. I still play Dungeons and Dragons Second Edition.
right,
I will not. I have played Fifth, but I think it's garbage. Sorry.
yeah,
I
that's
know that other people love it, but I'm hardcore, and I understand that that thing, the
yeah.
first thing is the best thing.
You're always going to get attached to whatever you
Yeah.
were introduced to. That's what you're going to live and die by. Some people it's D&D third edition, some people it's fifth, some people it's first original D&D. Like, and they have different qualities about them that appeal to different people. So it's just a matter of like accepting that everybody can have what they want and respect that other people enjoy the things they enjoy. I don't
Yeah.
know why it has to be this competition, but that's people, I suppose. But fifth edition
They
being your
all
entry
they
point.
all they all exist. Yeah, yeah. I saw Requiem, and I have seen V20. I have some of the V20 books on PDF, because one of the things I don't like about fifth edition, even though I have not played, is lore-wise of removing, like, merging the disciplines. And I'm not a big fan of homogenization in general when it comes to gaming. I understand it's very much easier. It's not a huge issue for me, but sometimes I do go back. For example, I have True Brujas in my
Mm-hmm.
story. It's not for players, it's for species, and players can't really learn temporis or anything, but I still
Right.
had to figure out, okay, how do they work? Um, Same for I have the Morrigan in my story, and she is a, oh, I can't remember. It's a druidic type of gangrel where they kind of paint boats and
Yep.
war paints and all that. So I still go back and kind of look, because I think the V20 mechanics are closer to the lore,
Mm-hmm.
and some of the things in V5 are very. I mean, you almost have to, as a storyteller, say to a player sometimes, like, no, you cannot learn Valerian, for example.
Right.
I know it's technically possible mechanically, but I think this is a salubri power.
Right. It doesn't make sense to have
Yeah.
that kind of bleed over, but fifth edition really blurred the lines on all of that and made it. And maybe that's the direction they're going. Maybe that's, maybe there is some story influence on that, but that's still kind of yet to be seen. They haven't
I,
really
I,
explained why they did it as well as they could.
mm,
And I agree with you. Like the lore was much more intrinsically tied into the mechanics of the older editions than it is now. And that was one of the biggest hills for me to climb in learning fifth edition, was breaking the mentality of these things are supposed to be separate. Demontation is strictly Malkavian. It is not Ventru or anybody who gets their hand on Dominate. Same with a lot of the other presence abilities and everything like that. Like these were all very clearly defined and divided, and very much clan based in their
mm,
origins, and they really took a lot of that away, and that was at first a big learning curve. I have since come around on it and just said, okay, if this is the way they're going to take the game, who am I to fight it? I will
I
figure it
mean,
out as I go.
you get some very good things, and you
Mm-hmm.
get some things that require adjustment, like hunger.
Yep.
Hunger. I have not played V20 again, but I talk to people, and what I understand, it sounds like very much like mana. You kind of,
Blood points. Yep.
it's like you pull a raid boss, you do all the things, and then you run into the room, right?
Yep.
And you kind of always know how hungry you are.
Mm-hmm.
But with V5, it's like it's always a chance. It's always a chance.
I
The
love
beast might
that.
be, yeah.
I
And
love that. That's one
I
of the
love
best
that
things.
that that you can use kind of hunger to talk to your players
Mm-hmm.
whenever they fuck up, and you
Yep.
just, yeah, hey, you're doing a thing and I want you to do another thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh,
or
100%.
or
It
or keep going.
characterizes the beast better than ever before. We never had mechanics that really, I mean, you had your frenzy checks and everything like that in the older editions, but you never had a mechanic that almost created a character of its own, that created this second character. It took a
Uh,
lot more work on the behalf of the storyteller to do it with blood points and everything, because you could have upwards of 20, 30, 40 blood points depending on your character, whereas now you get 5 hunger, that's it, and you can
it
stave it
doesn't
off for a while, but eventually it's going to fill up if you play long enough without feeding. And
and blood potency is where it is, right? It's
mhm,
I think if I just like take V5, and what I like a lot, and what I kind of miss, and what I don't, it's I really love the hunger. I love the simplicity of the roles, and except for combat, it's kind of wonky. I'm still trying to figure it out. Um, I miss paths.
yes, for blood
Um,
sorcery, yeah.
Oh, yeah, those two, but they could be rated, but like Road of Sin, or
Oh,
like,
yes.
because it's all humanity. So if I want to make a Sabbat campaign or a Mythos campaign, I have to make my own house rules for that kind of thing. My house rule is if you're on a path, you're humanity 5, boom, follow your path. This is your convictions. For example, Emery in my Anarch story, she became cult of Mithras, which meant the chronicle tenets no longer applied to her. But she had to follow the convictions of the cult of Mithras in the Blood Gods.
Yeah.
What I don't like about fifth edition, like the thing I wish I could not do, is ambition, desire, and touchstones.
Mm.
I think I'm trying my best to make it important and use the mechanics, but it's the thing I forget the most often. And it's most annoying when I write because I feel like I have to do something with it.
Right.
That was the most confusing thing when I started out, is why is not this not a part of your backstory? Why is this a mechanic?
Yeah.
And it took me a long time to figure out. And the next chronicle that I'm doing, I'm really going 100% in on these mechanics
Yeah.
for the first time ever. Because I want to do something with them, but I feel like they're in my way and I don't want to have that feeling.
Yeah, they replaced the nature and demeanor mechanic of the older editions, which I loved that mechanic. I loved who you are in the inside versus who you present to others. I loved the concept of that. And then
Yeah,
replacing it with convictions and touchstones and ambition and desire. They simplified so much in fifth edition that made it streamlined. The game streamlined a lot more, but they also added some complicated elements in terms of the touchstones and ambitions and desires. And yeah, I think same for me, who's been running the game for 2.5, 3 years now. Um, that's something I forget about too. Is the importance of ambition and like checking in with people's desires and incorporating that into the story and everything like that. Because it seems so not important to me. You know what I mean? Like it's not an important element, but it really is.
yeah,
I mean, a lot of the mechanics are based off of those things. And if you forget about them or don't do them, you are losing a chunk of mechanics that are important towards character development and growth and
yeah.
the ability to recover willpower damage and that kind of stuff. It's all intrinsically tied into that. So
Yeah.
if you aren't managing that or minding that, you can fall behind or lose a big element of the game as well. So that's a very very good point.
I
Um,
mean, players, all please remind your storytellers of your ambition and desire, because we cannot remember. And I mean, touchstones often just become a thing where people get punished or get stains,
mhm.
which I think is, I mean, you can use them that way, and I suppose vampires would, because they're cowards, right? But
Right.
um, and they cannot kill each other. But I think, and that's the goal at least for the next story, I think it would be more fun if they're involved in the story in another way than players saying, "I want to check on my touchstone."
Right. Yeah, if you
Like they,
make them important SPCs in the storyline and that there are pre-written encounters with these SPCs and they're not just simply there to be weaknesses for your characters or, used
and
as,
kind
as
of
bait.
put them in the line of fire
For
instead
sure.
of just having someone threaten them
Right.
or kidnap them or something. But they're like walking around with the coterie. And that particular player will always be like half a mind, half on the touchstone and the goal, and it will kind of create even more tension, because if you frenzy in that moment, it's gonna, yeah, your
Yeah,
touchstone is
it's
not
going to
gonna
go
have a good
very
day.
poorly. It's going to be a
Yeah.
very bad thing. But
And
yeah,
also
there's
vampires are paranoid, so it's also keeping that secret. Like I care for this person
one
to the
thing I
rest of the coterie.
I like about the touchstone mechanic is that it ties into the humanity. It ties into the like this is your your grip on humanity is based around these other people. I really appreciate that they brought something into the mechanics and into the game as a whole that made you think about like if it weren't for these people, if it weren't for these touchstones, you would just slip into becoming a monster. Like it'd be a fast track to becoming a monster, and that these are the things that remind you of what it is to be human because that's really the story at the end of the day. of Vampire the Masquerade is how long can you hold on to being a human before completely losing everything and just going into full-on ravening monster.
I mean,
And
it's humans pretending to be vampires, pretending to be humans.
right, exactly.
Yeah.
And so I think that is a really cool element, and finding creative ways to incorporate it into the story is important, which ties into how you prepare for a campaign, talking about that with your players, getting an understanding of where they're coming from with those characters. You talked about ambition. Like, yes, players remind your storytellers of your ambition, but also in character creation, work with your storyteller about your ambition. Because I've seen many times before people come up with character concepts and ambitions and desires that are never going to come into play in the chronicle, that never, aren't considered in the story, and it would almost be a departure from the story to try and follow that ambition. Like, oh, my ambition's to become a Justicar. Well, this game is not going to incorporate becoming a Justicar, so it's kind of a useless ambition at that point. It's not going to come into play, and a good storyteller will make it come into play. But if you don't have that discussion early on and you just go, "Hey, my ambition's to become a Justicar," the storyteller might be like, "I don't have anything for that. Like, that's not in my plan. That's not in my
or
game strategy."
or you have to make it really ambiguous, right? Any climb to power or moving up
Right.
the political ladder would kind of move towards the ambition.
Right.
I think the desire is more helpful, at least for me, because I know what the player immediately wants, and a lot of desires can be vague, and
Right.
I don't know what to do with them. For the next chronicle, the Anak story was the most railroaded story I've ever done. I don't think the players felt it, but for me it was very much, I have this I need to tell, and I kind of need to push you through the story because they're all very young vampires, fletchlings basically, and the Baron just kind of pushed them in directions, and they were very chaotic. But the I think the next one is more of a sandbox. Well, it is. It's going to be a lot on me, but I told my players I need a very clear desire and ambition from you, because I'm going to write you an arc for each of
Right.
your characters, um, which I did not do in the previous. I mean, they all had goals and their things they wanted to do, and some of them achieved it. But the main purpose of the story was to tell my story, where the next one is more tell their story while things happen in the background.
Right.
That's going to be very creepy.
So I want
But
to talk more about your Anarch campaign in a moment here, because it actually involves, you had mentioned Emery, also known as Rebecca, also amongst our community known as Mimic for Hire, one of our storytellers. So I'd love to delve into that in a second, but let's talk about how you prepare for a chronicle, because it sounds like you are preparing for a chronicle, which we're going to get deeper into in a little bit. But what's your process when you go to start a game? Where do you begin? What steps do you go through in designing a story? What do you do before you even get to the point of recruiting players? What is your process? Because a lot of people want to become storytellers, but they don't even know where to start. How do you go through your process?
first of all, D&D, vampire, very different. Because just shortly, D&D is very much, there's a treasure over there, and the players will go to the treasure.
Yep.
Vampires requires a bit more. But I'm trying to change my process as well, because previously I will start with a red thread. Like, where does the story begin and where does it end? You
Right.
always, in my opinion, you need to know where it ends.
Yep.
Maybe you'll figure out on along the way if you don't really, if you just have a long kind of chronicle in mind. But for example, with the Anak story, it was supposed to end with them killing and that episode is out, so I'm not spoiling anything, with them killing the Sabbat leader. It didn't, but that was my red thread when I initially wrote the story. But yeah, that's the first point. You need to know what kind of story you're telling. And previously, I would kind of write every Sunday. I would sit down and write scenes and edit and watch the episodes, but that's a lot of work, and I don't recommend it. So for the next one, it's a sandbox, and I will be doing a bit of weekly writings, but it's not going to be as much. I'm building an entire world, and every character, everything important, it takes time. And if you have a story you want to tell, I'm gonna quote one of my friends, but think of Spider-Man. Don't do New York, just do Manhattan. Start small, expand, brief descriptions like what is the main purpose of this SPC? Is it to help the players? Is it for boons? Do they own a nightclub? It's just kind of start small, and then I promise you, all the things you have not thought of, the players will ask you, and then you have to come up with it anyway.
Yep.
Because that's how players work. You want them to go east, they go west.
Always, always. It's never going to go according to plan. And I like that you brought up come up with an end goal in mind, an ending point for the story. You know, like you said, the threat. Come up with where you want it to end. Does that mean that the chronicle has to end there? No. Like that, if you feel like there's some place to go after that, great. But at least if you have that mindset, if you have that or initial plan of like, play characters get introduced, this is going to be where I plan for this story or this chronicle to end. And maybe it does spin off into another story or does continue on in some way. But at least if you have that bookmark of a beginning and an end, you can fill in the details in between and you can have that knowledge of the game's supposed to end here. It's less likely to lose momentum or lose steam or drop off because you know where you're headed. Where I think a lot of new storytellers and a lot of new, game masters, dungeon masters fall into the trap of is they don't want their story to end. They're just going to keep playing until they're not playing anymore. And I think that makes a less fulfilling game, a less fulfilling story. Players are more likely to get bored. Storytellers are more likely to get burned out. They're going to run out of creative juice at some point if they don't have a beginning, middle, and end already in mind. How they get to that middle, how they get to that end can go all over the place. But the reality of like this is supposed to be a chapter or it's supposed to be a complete story. It's not supposed to be a kind of endless ellipses of and then and then and then because
I
again, yeah,
mean,
you'll run out. You'll run out of ideas, you'll run out of juice or you'll lose the
that's
byline.
that's the reason I ended the Camarilla story. I said to my players, I can keep making side quests for you guys, but I don't find that interesting, and I
No.
will burn out.
Yeah.
And it was kind of weird. I don't know if the audience noticed it. I hope not. But they had one of the players just changed character, and he was not playing that character for many episodes. And I just like, you have achieved everything. Like,
Yeah.
I just want to know where a character goes from here, and I can keep making side content,
Right.
but I will rather move on to the next thing,
Right.
which would be the anarchs.
Start a new story, start something fresh, and get a fresh beginning rather than holding on to something long past its expiration date and
Mm,
just watching it rot in front of your eyes. I completely agree, and I think that if players and storytellers both come in with the mindset of nothing is forever, this
yeah.
isn't going to last forever. We can't. It's unrealistic for it to last forever. This is supposed to be a section of time in the grand scope of things. This is
Yeah.
going to have an end. And if we all go in with that knowledge, it can be a very satisfying end for everyone. If everyone's accepting of the fact that this will end and that we are going to wrap this all up at some point, everyone can be really, feel fulfilled by it. But
Mm,
this modern era of storytelling, like in our Marvel movies and all this other stuff, where there's just always another chapter, always another story, and as we've seen, the stories get weaker, the movies get worse the longer they hang on to something.
I mean, you care less because you've seen the stakes. If you kill a Sabbat leader 10 times, you're not going to care at the rest of the 9
Right,
because you've
right.
done it.
And I think all
Uh,
the best stories like Lord of the Rings were great because they had an end, because they had a beginning, a middle, and an end, and it's this beautiful piece of literature or this beautiful piece of film because it's all contained, it's all
yeah.
wrapped up, everything's tied up at the end. Do we miss the characters? Sure. Do we wish there were more adventures? Sure. but you can just go back and rewatch it because it's perfect in what it was versus, us getting sick of Aragorn, us getting sick of Legolas
and
because they just keep telling stories that don't matter.
and sometimes characters can come back in this. So many of my characters have become SPCs. So many of my friends' characters has become SPCs. I try to immortalize, like the Prince of London is a player in the Camarilla story.
It's amazing.
You can immortalize these things and kind of still refer to it, and write your story that have a very strong beginning, have an idea of the end. But I promise you, if you want to tell a story, your players are going to do 50% of your work
Yeah,
at least.
absolutely.
For the middle part, they'll give you ideas, and you'll pretend, yeah, I thought of that, but you
Yeah, if
didn't.
you have those tent poles
Uh,
for beginning, middle, and end, they will fill in so much of it for you. You just have to think of consequences and how it's going to affect the grander setting, but they will drive the story forward as long as you give them a goal or a direction to drive in. They'll tell the story from there, and that's something that is wonderful about World of Darkness that I think sets it apart from a lot of other role playing games is that it is collaborative. It's a collaborative process where it's not just you're at the beginning of a dungeon, the treasure's at the end of the dungeon. I've already thought out every trap, every twist, every turn, every bad guy, every encounter. Like this is a lot more free form and can have a lot more flexibility and a lot more player input, which is why I love it as much as I do because it is a back and forth
I think it's
improvisational art.
I think it's kind of because it's grounded in reality, because what you're describing, I feel the same in Marvel superheroes,
Yep,
TSR, old RPG, which is also in the real world, and it's the same kind of free form, and that's why I mentioned it was very different coming from Dungeons and Dragons into Vampire, because vampires is ultimately politics and people talking about doing things, but not maybe not even doing them, because they have people for that.
yeah.
It's things moving in the background, the Great Jihad. Um,
Well, a lot of
yeah,
people criticize railroad storytelling, but I feel like Dungeons and Dragons is kind of meant for railroad storytelling. It's meant for you have this quest that I've already thought of, that I've already planned out, and while you could take some side quests and stuff along the way, it is you got to stick on the main quest path because most D&D games that I've seen that have failed are games that advertise themselves as open world or that there isn't a set destination or a goal. It's just kind of like, well, there's a bunch of things available, and then people get bored or they forget or they lose interest and the game just dies. It never gets a satisfying conclusion. So in a
mm,
game like that, you kind of have to be like, the bad guy lives in the tower in this evil land. You have to defeat all these dungeons on the way to getting to that tower and toppling that bad guy. And it does kind of require bumpers, like in bowling, bumpers to keep you on that path, which some people call railroading. I just call it a narrative. Like you need a
it's
narrative.
it's the carrot. I think is easier
Yeah.
in fantasy. I'm making a D&D story where it's kind of they have to travel all over Faerun, so they go to a town. They do the thing that I have made in the town. That's what you're describing. That's the dungeon.
Right.
But then they need to go to the next town. But the players will have to tell me which route they go.
Yeah.
So in
Right.
between sessions, I have to figure out what happens on the way.
Yep.
And that's the least railroading version, I think, of that.
Absolutely.
Uh,
And that's an
but but
art to be able to
yeah,
do that well and to keep people engaged in that. That is an art. That's a talent. Because I've also seen people be like, okay, I'm like, the mission is to go defeat this evil necromancer. But then the players are like, I want to leave the continent and go somewhere else. And it's like, no, no, the story is to go after the necromancer. Where are
but
you going?
that's again like
Like,
if you need to go west, we're going east. Okay,
why?
what can I put in the way out east
Yeah,
that
I've got
makes
to
them turn around? Beware
bounce you
dragons.
back. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Um,
But yeah,
and that can get fun, but it can get tiresome very quick, especially if you have a particularly chaotic group of players who
I mean,
want to fight back against you.
it's easier with magic, but I think in vampire you can kind of have someone show up or just threaten people or
Or just kill their
they,
touchstones.
yeah, hint at something bad will happen, and that's enough incentive. But it's I feel maybe that's just me coming from a fantasy kind of thing, but I feel vampire players have to be herded more,
Mhm.
like sheep herded through the story, because, and again, it's totally fair. They're paranoid. They're
Yep.
selfish. They work. They suck at working together.
Right.
They don't trust each other. It can be frustrating sometimes when you have given information to a player and they don't want to share it. But in Vampire, it's very valid
Right.
because it's ha ha ha. This is gold for me. I know something nobody else does. But as a storyteller, it's like I told you this, so you could kind of do this.
So you could pass it along to everyone
Yeah,
else so that we could
yeah,
keep. But also, vampires are inherently selfish. Knowledge is power. Like, there's
yeah,
all these
yeah.
other extra added layers and elements to consider when you
But
do
then
want
you
information.
have to be creative. Then you have to like have a personal power or something threatening them. It's a very different way of storytelling. But I love it.
I
There
love
is
it too.
a very good reason why I do this for YouTube and not AD&D.
No,
I
it's a
think
lot
it's more
more.
entertaining.
It's more entertaining and challenging for the storytellers. The storytellers, because of that collaborative element, yes, you kind of know what's going to happen, but you have no idea how you're going to get there. In D&D, you can kind of just know all along where they're going, how they're going to get there. Maybe there's a couple of side trips here and there, but for the most part you have it all pretty plotted out. Whereas in Vampire, it could go so many different directions and you kind of have to stay on your toes as a storyteller to be able to react as much as plan. Like,
Yeah,
it's a lot harder to plan for vampire in my mind than it is for D&D. You have to be very very flexible and willing to react in vampire or werewolf or any of those games. You have to
I
have that
th-
flexibility to react.
that's why I think the most important thing as a storyteller in Vampire is knowing your SPCs,
Mm-hmm.
because you don't know which one of them the players are gonna visit.
Yep.
If you can make an SPC and they never go there,
Yeah.
like it's but you need to know. And I'm not saying because I suck at accents and all that, right? And making them feel different. I think some people are very, very, very good at that. But you at least have to, in your own mind, know which character you're in now,
Yeah.
like which character you're playing and portraying and what they're doing. Um, and it is easier if you played them before. So
Yeah.
I highly recommend using your old player characters as SPCs
Yeah.
if at all possible. Nemesis in my story was one of my characters, which is why she's so prominent. And I don't know how or why in any story, but she always immediately almost with the players becomes that mean bitch that they're so afraid of.
Yeah.
and,
Well, and
and, and
I think there's something to be said for, especially as a new storyteller or an early storyteller, reusing the same setting, reusing some of the same characters, because you do get practice with that, but you
mm,
also get experience with those characters. Those characters grow and evolve and change and develop. Whereas when
yeah,
you're bouncing around settings, there's a risk that SPCs will come off kind of two dimensional or copies of previous SPCs, and that they're not going to feel as lived in or fully fleshed out because that you're only spending a short time with them. Whereas if you revisit a setting like London for your case or St. Pete for mine, you can really allow those characters to evolve and to have experiences and have their own ambitions, and they become more and more real the
yeah.
more and more time you get with them, and the more and more you can allow events to
There's
impact them and to change them.
there's more and more, and like I began with Fall of London, and there's obviously characters in there. I scrapped most of them. Some of them I use, um, and if you kind of followed along, I don't think many people did, but if you followed along on my Pinterest, where I upload the character art for like inspiration, and so I know what the people look like. I started with like 20, and I ended up with like 70
Mm-hmm.
characters in London. Uh, which is one of the reasons I'm moving away from London for a time, because
Right.
I'm going to America next.
Oh, really? Okay.
I'm going to America.
So, with London being your primary setting in your previous games, have you ever had an opportunity to visit London personally? Have you ever gone there and been able to walk the streets and kind of absorb the atmosphere?
Yes, very much so. Some of the places in the story I have very much been at, and I don't know why, but I'm just fascinated with British culture, especially Victorian. And I'm Danish. I don't have this like
Right.
there's nothing influencing me here. But for some reason, like even that the accent, and I'm not talking like Manchester or something, but that very clean. I
Hmm.
don't want to say posh, but at least educated accent of British people. It just sounds like music, and
Yes,
the buildings and everything. And I just thought, well, London is the center of the world in a sense,
it
and it
is.
kind of kicked off the fifth edition with
Yeah.
Mithras. Um, I mean, it's the reason for the second Inquisition. For people that don't know, people that won't know in game, but Mithras kind of started that shit
Yep.
because he's a petty god,
Yep.
and he can wait it out. But I
One,
don't know.
it's
It felt more close to home than America.
yeah.
I mean, Denmark and British people, Danish and British people were very similar in a lot of ways. We like cake, we like football, we like beer, that kind of thing.
Well, and it's
Um,
it's one of those defining locations throughout history, not just Vampire the Masquerade history or World of Darkness history, but actual history.
yeah,
It is a central point of where a lot of culture comes from, a lot of life comes from, and it's a melting pot of different cultures that come through. But you think of like imperialism, you think of the evolution that London has gone through. It has been a a central point of mega powers for so long. And when
yeah,
I think we think of vampires, especially us longtime vampire fans, that is the perfect setting. Victorian age London is the perfect setting for a vampire story. Your Bram Stoker story is in London, and so it is. It's what we think of when we think of it, and there's a reason that Vampire the Masquerade World of Darkness highlights it so much. I mean, in 5th edition, they have not put nearly as much emphasis on specific locations, but one thing that has always stayed true, London and Chicago. Those
yeah.
are two primary locations that they never ignore when they are telling stories in World of Darkness. Those are two very, very important locations. So it makes sense for you
Even
to kind of,
from and even going back, I have Chronicles brewing, and maybe we'll see this one day. But it's called Baronies of Avalon, and we're going back to the year 1000 all the way up to 1990.
wow.
Uh, but it's a weird kind of story, and the players have, because it's reverse progression, which I know can feel bad. You start out as an elder, then you play the child, but it's kind of meant to walk parallel with everything that happened in vampire lore.
It's like a great legacy game. I like that a lot. That you're
But
thinking about that.
it's also passing on the torch,
Right.
but and
Right.
creating your own bloodline,
Oh,
which is the gimmick of it. Like Ventrue, instead of having presence, they have potence as a clan display, that kind of thing.
yeah. That's fantastic.
But that's also in Britain, and you can go really far back because Mithras is an old man.
That's
Uh,
Methuselah for you. Like,
uh,
around since quote unquote the dawn of time, basically.
yeah,
So yeah. No,
and
it's
he's been in Britain for 2,000 years, so I think you can do a lot with that. But yeah, I think for to answer the question, go back to, I think I just have a fascination with the city.
yeah.
Um, I don't know why. I cannot tell you why, but I am moving away from London for the next one, and I'm coming back at some other point. But I wanted to go to New England, Maine specifically,
Yeah.
and try something else. But I do not. Okay, I have experience and time, most of all, to do this, because if you start from scratch when you do this. You have to think of everything, and especially the town I'm making is fictitious, so I have to think about every district, every weird little thing. But
Yeah, you got to flesh it out. If you're building from scratch, you don't have a lot of source material to go off of. You have to really build it yourself.
yeah, and you start with the characters. I'm still working on it, and we're playing. I think the first session is September, so I have time, and I wouldn't be doing it if I didn't have time. But I just you have to start from scratch. You have to look at different cultures. For me, it's places I've never seen. So people who are from America or particularly Maine or the New England area might think that I'm portraying it inaccurately, and that's not what I'm trying to do. But I just it's an what's it called? Like eldritch horror thing. That's the word I was looking
Yeah,
for. Which is I was inspired by Arkham and Innsmouth and all that. So
yeah. Well, and that's the beauty of storytelling in this modern era, right? Is that we have the resources that if you wanted to go see New England, you could do it from a keyboard. You could do it
yeah,
behind a computer screen. Like you can get a good feel for it because there's articles and there's, analyses and all kinds of things that you can call upon to use to fund your own knowledge. Whereas, back when I started, we didn't have the internet. We didn't have the kind of access that we have now. If you were lucky enough, you had a library that had books on the subject in your town. Even then,
magazines,
yeah,
man.
magazines, like it's still a very limited scope and perspective because everything's in the eye of the beholder. You're not getting a variety of different writers writing about an area. Like maybe you're taking Stephen King novels for Maine and up there, but it's still a limited scope. You can only get one person's feel on it. But now you can read hundreds of articles about Maine or about, the Pacific Northwest or whatever the case may be, and that can give you a more detailed, rounded opinion and allow you to form your own perspective in an informed way,
Yeah.
which you weren't able to do before. And I think that's super cool, and that's going to be a huge asset for you in creating this. Is that you can do your research, and that research is endless. There are
Yes,
lots
but
and
you
lots of
you take some
opportunities.
creative freedoms as well, right?
For sure,
I
you
made
have
I
to.
made I
You
made a
have to.
small town, and I thought, okay, small town America, I don't know, probably 50,000 population, right? Then I looked at Portland, apparently 55. It's like, oh, they don't have large cities in Maine,
Yeah,
apparently.
yeah, right.
So I've created like the next large city that's completely fictitious, but you learn these kinds of things, and I don't know, some areas might have been better, but I wanted the whole point of this story is seclusion,
Right,
not only for the players but also for the viewer. It's very much this is not a part of the rest of the world.
right.
We know that it's there and everything, but we're in a prison, and that's why I had to make a fictitious town,
Right.
because there's a lot of weird shit that I don't think Maine normally has, like Indonesian architecture, for example. I don't know, maybe it's there, but I don't think.
Right.
Um,
But that's also the beauty of the world of darkness is you can have an explanation for that. You can create a reason for it because the supernatural forces can manipulate and control the perception of things. That there could be this small town that the rest of the world doesn't know about that is influenced by other cultures because vampires, mages, they hit it. They basically like that it's this surreal little location that has just fallen out of public consciousness because of these supernatural forces influencing it and being able to alter the way it's perceived. And I think that's a very cool mystery element. Is like, why is this place so strange? Why does it exist the way it exists? And you could tell an entire story or an entire chronicle just around that question of why is there an Indonesian influence in Maine of all
it's
places?
the I mean, the players wake up from torpor.
Yep.
They've slept for 20 something years. They don't know about Inquisition. They don't know about Vienna or any important events. And there is this thing that's keeping them trapped in this town, and it's keeping all supernaturals trapped. No one can leave. And they have to figure out, first of all, what the fuck happened, and why is any of this happening, and go around being vampire heroes, but they're not. They're
Right.
old. They're low humanity. They have ambition.
Yeah.
But
So lore is a very big, important piece of World of Darkness. I mean, they've less so in 5th edition, but definitely in previous editions. Like you said, you draw from 20th anniversary and from other source material. But lore is kind of a standout element of World of Darkness. That there is this meta plot. That there is this, world that they've fleshed out on their own in a lot of ways. And while you can tell stories in or out of that lore, it's still very much prevalent. It's written into the clans. It's written into the cultural societies, the Camarilla, the Sabbath, the Anarchs, everything.
I think it's a lot of it is rumors.
Mm-hmm.
So you get a lot of liberty or freedom with your stories
Yes.
compared to like Forgotten Realms, where everything is kind of set in stone. Vampires a lot rumor lore.
Yeah, they keep it vague enough that you can actually do with it what you will. And it seems like you take a lot of inspiration from lore, but you also take a lot of creative liberties in making it your own and adjusting it to where you see fit. Like running in London, you decided to, do away with a bunch of the characters, which is a beautiful choice and a freedom that you have. I think I wouldn't be going too far out on a ledge here and saying that Mithras is probably your favorite lore of the pre-written stuff, or is there something else?
I kind of just stumble on him, and now I use it's kind of a joke, but at this point because he's so fucking powerful, right? But
Right.
it's the main center. To go back to how I like this, the Fall of London I think can end in 6 different ways if you just follow the text.
Right.
And they resurrected Mithras. They're also a fault. They did the ritual and brought them all the items, risen to power, uh, and it's his land basically.
Mm-hmm.
And all the people, the Inquisition, were hunting Queen Anne and all her subjects, and it's just very much in the book that you have this list of characters, but they are not going to survive unless you want them to.
Yeah.
The players have to go around to different elders in the story and get this kind of object. And I think they killed all of them except one, where they made a deal with him, Queen Anne's sire, Valerius. So he's still alive in my world, but the others are dead. And Queen Anne is very much because they made very sure. So again, my players they're writing the story for me.
Yeah.
And then with the Camarilla story, they had to maneuver around to call the Mithras. We were kind of allowing the Camarilla, but they just got rid of them.
Yep.
So that there's a lot of tension. And making deals, obviously you have to deal with. You can't just go to war with the Camarilla, even though you're Mithras. He's not an idiot. And his heralds are certainly not. Mithras
Right.
is more kind of, he's in the background. He has his people. He's like, you deal with it.
Yeah.
I don't want to. That's how I see him. Like, I want to travel the world. I just want to hang out. I just want to be a god.
He's going to
So
do his own thing and let
yeah.
his subjects handle all the minutia and details and paperwork about running this organization, but he wants to just be this free forming entity that can do what he wants and act how he wants. And
So I've removed him from the Camarilla story. He was off in the background discussing things with the Camarilla to let the Camarilla coterie have the freedom of, okay, we're not gonna get killed
yeah,
if
you're
we
not going to run into
try.
Methuselah if you try to pull something.
Yeah, I mean the Heralds of the Sun are still gonna come and say, but there's you can deal with this people.
Yeah.
And then I brought it back again with the Anarch story for uh, Emery was at fault because she sought that path, and Mithras appears, which he has never done before. He's never made the appearance, but I brought that back, and then I kind of set London up for the future. Because of my other group, they're killing everyone in London. the original Heroes of the Sun group, apart from one player, and that's the sad part. He passed away, so I had to find a way to honor him.
Yeah.
But they are playing. Either you have they're exiling, subjugating, or like killing every vampire in London. We just not want to. So that's future London. When we come back, called the Mithras will be in charge. The Camarilla will have been kicked out, and they're at war with the Tremere and Giovanni, because we do not like those.
Right.
And of course Setites, but that goes without saying.
That kind of goes without saying with the ministry in general. Like the Setites are going to be problematic, and
Yeah.
you're never really friends with the Setites. Like maybe you can get a temporary alliance out of them, or they'll use you for something, or whatever the case may be. But there's always an opposition there, I think.
I can't remember why, but Mithras has some adversity towards them. My wife, she plays a La Sombra Witch Slayer. Her two convictions are kill all Tremers, and the other one is kill all Setites. that is her purpose.
Pretty cut and dry, yeah.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the Anarch campaign a little bit more, since it does have a direct link to one of our community members and to the community as a whole to a certain degree. For those who haven't watched it and are being enticed to do so, how would you explain to them what kind of journey they're going to go on if they were going to go back and watch that Anarch campaign from the very beginning? What could they look forward to? What was kind of the premise or the story that the Anarchs went through in that game? Give us a bit of a sales pitch in regards to that game, because I think we're going to get some viewers who are going to go after watching this and want to go back and watch that. Kind of sell it to them or give them a Reader's Digest version of that game.
I mean, if you want to watch the whole timeline, which you can go without, but then you obviously start with the Camarilla story. The quality is lower because I just started out. But if you just jump into the Anarch stories, you will have no problems figuring out what's happening, because people will talk about it. And the players, some of the players in the Camarilla story will also be in the Anarch story. So people kind of know what's going on.
Right.
But it's essentially they're all fledglings. I mean, I started them with no Sea of Time. The power level was very low, and they have lost their sires to the Inquisition. They're from different places of the world. They're kind of just traveling around. They have no place, and this Baron from London is recruiting. And obviously he lays it on a bit thick about the state of London, that it's a bit better than it maybe is, to kind of get people there. But they arrive and they work together with the local baron, who they have a strenuous peace with the Camarilla, as they usually do. And then they go on their very own chaotic journey, as Emery would describe it. I think it's very chaotic. They're a chaotic group. They're the embodiment of anarchs. They fight, they laugh, they do things very efficiently sometimes, and then other times they will stumble through the easiest tasks. But they are very much, they are the most dysfunctional family that I think I have had as players. And I think when they're on task, they're really, really effective. But getting them there can be a lot of issues. And I think that's also some of the fun roleplay.
Yeah, I've gotten
they're very different characters.
I've received some bits and pieces throughout the journey, because Rebecca and I talk quite a bit. And so she would always kind of give me updates on what was happening. And there were some days that I was just like, well, what now? And other days where I'm like, okay, this makes sense. But it does sound like a fun and wild ride. So if you're looking for something that is less tied up as the Camarilla can be, less restrictive and bound, it seems like a really, really fun story that's going to take some very unpredictable twists and turns. And so
they were very brave, and they were very anarch in the sense of, let's say a Camarilla come threaten them, they were very much fuck you.
Yeah.
Like, bring it on. Even though they're fledglings, I think they embodied the spirit of what it means to be an anarch very well, while like keeping in touch with who they are as people.
And that's a hard thing to do. I feel like a lot of people, especially people who are new to World of Darkness or new to Vampire the Masquerade, when they go to play Anarchs, they either end up going Camarilla Light or they end up going Sabbat. like it's a fine line to walk to play anarchs appropriately, because it's not quite either. It takes elements of both to a certain degree, but it's also its own thing, and
Mm.
it has its own motivations. And so when you do get a group of well played anarchs, it is a beautiful, beautiful thing, because it is rare. And I think a lot of people don't quite understand how rare it is. Like, a lot
I
of
mean,
our anarchs have fallen into camarilla behavior, which they can do, but at that point, why not just be Camarilla? You know what I mean? So anyway, go ahead.
no, these people did not respect the rules, and I think that was the most important part. I will. They are two-faced bitches, all of them. They're not true anarchs. They're not like, yay, the Baron is my best friend, and then they all have their own agenda, and they're using the sect as a oh, I have friends kind of
That's
thing.
vampire in
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
general.
yeah,
Like,
yeah.
even all the
Yeah.
Camarilla vampires are two-faced bitches in that regard. Like, it's all
But
about selfishness and getting what you want.
at some point during the game, the players had given me enough where I had the thought, what if I can make none of them Anarch by the end of the game?
Have them
No,
all either go Sabat or
yeah,
Camarilla or something like that.
I tried my best. You'll have to watch the show to figure out if I actually did it. But
That's absolutely incredible. So now let's go back to talking about this new game, which is called Dusktown, right? Dusktown Chronicles. This is the one that you're setting in America,
yeah,
in Maine. Talk to me a little bit about what made you decide to get away from London, what made you decide to choose America. What was the thought process? Was it just a matter of you'd spent so much time, so much of your experience was in London, that you wanted to try something new? And kind of give us a early sales pitch, because we're going to debut the intro, the trailer, if you will, for the game, a world debut tonight, which I'm very, very excited to do. But kind of tell us what is up ahead for that game, what we can look forward to. I know it's not coming out until the fall, which is very, very smart to pre-record a bunch of episodes, because scheduling is the bane of TTRPGs.
I am
Uh,
learning from my mistakes.
but give us kind of a something we can look forward to, or what we're going to see potentially in this game.
It's a very different thing. As I said, it's this time power level very different. They're ancilla. They're all some of them close to 300. Um, the process short. I had like so many ideas, like the Baronies of Avalon, a Vikings by Night,
Yep.
um, Copenhagen. I thought maybe do something a bit closer to home. Um, but I don't know. But I got this. I think a lot of creative people will know this feeling, but this spark just hit me, and I thought Eldritch horror, and then I looked at Arkham, and I love H.P. Lovecraft. I think the descent into madness is very fun. And then I started to figure out how can I like integrate that in vampire, and we have willpower, so that was easy.
Yeah.
Um, and then okay, how do I like make this? It's I wanted to make the most creepy place, even for vampires. And they wake up. They went to bed in the 90s. They don't know why, and I cannot tell you why because that would be spoiling a lot.
That's right.
But
That's a part of
they
the
don't know
story.
why. They wake up in 2024. So let's be fair here. Technology has not things have become smaller, flatter, and things. But you know a phone when you see one.
Right. Still be
So
jarring, to say the very least. 30-year difference, like, that can still be very jarring, but
yeah,
the concepts you'll understand. Yeah, you're not
yeah.
looking at
You're
you know
not like
Victorian vampires waking up in modern nights, where it's like, what is that moving metal box on the street, and why is everything so loud? Like, no, they're gonna
that's
get the
that.
basic concepts.
Yeah, because that's what I wanted to avoid.
Right.
Like the whole having 3 sessions of players pretending they're dumb and don't know shit
Yeah.
because
What we do in the shadows esque, like, we're
yeah,
not.
yeah.
I don't understand life or anything. Yeah.
You'll kind of forget that, but it's a town in Maine where obviously there's a lake and things are happening in the lake. There's a fog surrounding the town at night, every night. That's keeping, if you believe the rumors, all supernatural beings in. So they wake up in this town. They have a butler, a mysterious butler, who tells them they have a purpose. They have a codex of rules they need to follow. If they don't follow the rules, they will get punished by the butler. And when they begin asking questions, they have made the rules. They don't remember making the rules. They don't remember why they're in this cult. They remember each other, or at least each other as allies. They remember their past, how they became kindred, who they were when they're alive, but they have no memory of the town or the cult or anything that's happening here. So there's going to be a lot of weird things, a lot of wraith I'm going to bring into it, because there's a lot of they cannot move on either because of the fog. And there's going to be eldritch horror, so abyss. I'm going to pull a lot from the abyss, and I'm trying to bring as many supernatural creatures from World of Darkness into this little town.
I love it.
So at least the changeling and things like that. And there are very few vampires, obviously, because the population is not like, even having 13 vampires for a town of 50,000 people is stretching it.
It's stretching it, yeah.
So when these 5 kindred wake up, it's an issue. But what is the local leader supposed to do? Like, you can kill them. That's an issue. You don't know how powerful they are, or
Right.
you can put them to work and make them work for their food and their domain.
So how are politics gonna like play a role in this? Are you gonna draw from the Sabbat or from the Camarilla, or are you kind of making your own deal
It's
with
a
this?
weird thing, and it's meant to be weird because they wake up. They're supposed to they're told follow Camarilla rules, so the usual traditions are in play. But the leader is a baron. So when you go there and you're like, okay, he's Anarch, obviously, but no, he's not. They
Right.
follow Camarilla rules very strictly, actually. And there's one vampire for each clan. Some of them will be very apparent. Some of them will be weird, but they're meant to be. Like the Nos, obviously it's a Nos.
Right, yeah. It's hard to
uh,
mistake a Nos.
but it's it's a place they know what's happening outside. They cannot leave. Humans can go in and out of town easily during the day, but all supernaturals are kind of locked in, and it's that kind of story where it's very investigative, and that's what I told my players. And it's a lot of sanity checks, like make sure your character does not go crazy. Funnily enough, I have a lot of players now with a lot of resolve and composure for some reason.
Oh, well, who knew?
No,
With a
oh,
warning like that, what?
7 willpower, you said. Okay.
Yeah. Well, it does. It feels like a lot like, I don't know if you've ever dabbled in Call of Cthulhu, which is another TTRPG system, but it
That's
does seem like it's incorporating elements from that
that's
blended with
exactly what I
Vampire the
wanted to
Masquerade.
do.
That sounds
I wanted
fantastic.
eldritch horror. I wanted weird shit in the World of Darkness. And the lovely thing about World of Darkness sometimes is it's very ambiguous, and all H.P. Lovecraft's all god cosmic horror thing, it's very easy to make that into Abyss,
Yeah.
because a lot of these things do exist in the Abyss, and the Abyss
And the
is a very,
Umbra, and like it's obvious that those things were an influence on the creation of this game. They do not ignore
yeah,
that kind of influential part, especially in Hunter. You know, Hunter draws upon Eldritch Horror a ton, and it draws upon cryptids and the unknown and that kind of stuff. So they clearly did recognize the importance of this and did make it a part of the world, a part of the setting. So to bring that in as a strong influence on a story is not unheard of. It's not unnecessary or unusual. It would fit in the setting quite nicely.
I mean, to sum it up, if you want to watch a story with a lot of hopefully competent and old vampires and a lot of weird and different supernatural creatures in a town where vampires are scarce, I think this will be a fun story for you.
Well,
It's a complete sandbox this time.
I'm
I have a
absolutely sold.
timeline. I have a timeline of things are gonna happen. I told my players, I'm perfectly happy with you sitting around for 3 sessions around a table just planning, but things will happen in the background.
Right. The
As
world continues to turn
Yeah,
regardless of how long you're taking to get involved in it. It's going to keep developing and evolving.
yeah.
Well, I'm absolutely sold. So let's take a look at this trailer really quick, and then we'll come right back and talk about it a little bit more. But this is the trailer for Dusktown. Take a look, everyone. Wow. I mean, there's so much to be said about the visuals that you incorporated into that. There's obviously a lot of hints being dropped. It looks like you had artwork for all the characters, as you'd spoken of earlier, that you like to have the character artwork, the SPC artwork. So there's a lot of images in there that have very, very resonant and strong impacts just coming in the images itself. I love the way that the trailer was cut together, and it definitely gives you an eldritch horror feel, especially those last images we saw at the end. Uh, that's super, super exciting. So, do you have an idea or an approximation as to when the episodes of that are going to start airing?
Oh, we're recording in September. Uh, I promised myself at least 2 sessions, which would mean 4 episodes. I think October.
October?
I don't want to wait too long because people will forget you on YouTube.
Right.
Um, and I want to get it out there, but I also I'm by no means an editor, and I'm just learning by doing. The trailers. I mean, I can't do real video editing. It's just cutting and some light and trying to make it move.
Super cool.
Uh, but I want to up the production value on Dusktown, which means spending more time on it, because usually I
Yes.
just cut and I have like an ambient thing, and it takes a long time. And it's I think it's serves its purpose, but I want to do more with
Yeah.
it, like more. For example, when you're in a forest, there's a different ambience, and um, but yeah, October, I think.
No, yeah.
Uh,
Speaking as somebody who has had to evolve production over a great deal of time, you can go back to sessions I aired in November versus now, and you can see the work that's been put into it. And I totally understand the value of upping the production value. It just makes it look cleaner. It hooks viewers a lot more. And yeah, of course, the constant struggle of being a media or content creator is you go long enough, people forget about you. So I totally understand that. But October, spooky season, Halloween seems like a really good time to start airing this. So everybody out there, keep an eye out for the Dusktown Chronicles coming hopefully in the fall, near October. But I'm sure you can stay up to date on all of that, and I'm sure we'll get some announcements on the YouTube channel leading up to the debut of it, without a doubt. But that does look very, very intriguing, and I love the world of darkness kind of veil that's placed over this kind of eldritch horror story that's going to unfold, and it'll be a very unique and new perspective on a game that has been played, especially in St. Pete, hundreds of times, thousands of times. To see this new view on it is very, very, very exciting, and I'm really looking forward to being a fan and being a viewer of it. I think that's just a really, really cool thing you've got going on there.
I
What I
appreciate
want
it.
to talk about now is the future of the World of Darkness. I always ask my guests who have been immersed in it for long enough or have some experience with it where they think everything is going. Because obviously there are some major shifts in fifth edition. You know, the discipline's becoming a little more blended, less of a focus on lore and story, and a little bit more flexibility in it. We only have Fall of London and Chicago by Night. Like those are our two primary settings that they've
Yeah.
released. There's a little bit about Milwaukee and like Let the Streets Run Red and stuff like that, but for the most part, that's where they seem to have highlighted. There's some rumors about
I
Miami by
th-
Night coming out, but for the most
oh,
part, they're leaving it very
I
open. Yeah.
think I think Trail of Ash and Bone is set in Copenhagen as well.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So there's
But
another
I
one, but
think the only reason for that is the Banoakim invitation to the Camarilla happened in Denmark, in Odense, weirdly enough, which is a thing that only I can pronounce. um, the Odense I called it, and it sounds so weird to me because it's just like half my family from there, and it's kind of it's the people in Denmark you can't take seriously because of their accent. So
right.
I think it's very funny. And
um, but yeah, where do you think we're headed next? I like to ask people, like right now, World of
where do I
Darkness
think
is
or where do I hope we're going?
well,
Because those,
that's I want to know both, but they've come into a pretty good pattern of like they drop a major splat and then they drop a new, addendum to each setting. So, we've gotten a couple of new vampire books, a new werewolf book. Obviously the werewolf splat dropped, Hunter dropped last year. Where do you think we're going next, and where would you want us to be going next?
I mean, system wise, I think they're doing all of them. Hopefully, if they
Hopefully.
like at least have a core book for Changeling and Wraith and Mage, maybe even Demon. But where I think they're going vampire and lore, um, I think they are slowly. I mean, with the beckoning, which I'm not a fan of, but that's besides the point. I think they're slowly removing as many elders uh, and Scylla as
Mm-hmm.
they possibly can without explaining why some of them stays. It's a very weird thing, and I get why and half why not. I mean, it's the let the anarchs have more of an influence and let the elders kind of command less or be less threatening, which is I I'm personally like when elders are threatening and they're
Right.
just in the background and they can kind of just make the decision to kill you because it's horror. Um, but I think that's where they're going. I think the anarchs are going to be a lot more prominent. I
Yeah, they've
think they're.
shifted away from Camarilla versus Sabat to Camarilla and Anarch,
I
which
think
I think is the
the.
right move, honestly. Like, I think the Sabat had its time in the sun, and with the way culture is changing, the way we are processing media with sensitivities rising, it does make
Hmm.
sense that they want to take away the more
I
potentially
mean,
problematic
I
sect.
think I think the Sabat is just it's still going to be the boogeyman.
Yeah.
But it's a lot smaller, and especially with Shimishi joining the Anarchs, La Sombra joining the Camarilla, we have a lot more. We have a lot less factions actually,
Yeah.
and then you have the smaller ones like the True Black Hand and everything. But I think instead of the Anarch just being someone that Camarilla kind of kicks around, I think they're going for the Anarchs actually becoming a rival power
Hmm.
to the road to humanity,
Yeah.
because that's ultimately what Camarilla and Anarchs have in common
Yeah.
is the masquerade and trying to be human in
Yeah.
different ways, but
Well, and they've established that too with the flipping of Miami to an anarch city, with the murder of Hardestadt. Like
Yeah.
they've established some things that are saying, hey, the Anarchs aren't just the, step kid anymore. They are a force to be reckoned with, and with the Camarilla starting to crack and splinter, with these elders leaving unexpectedly, or those that are clinging and still hanging on, the power base is weakening, which is a perfect opportunity for the Anarchs to rise up.
Yeah.
uh we know that the next announced book is the Gehenna War book, which I hope will answer some questions about how this transition happened, maybe give a little bit more information on the beckoning, or what actually happened over in the Middle East with the Week of Nightmares. Like, give us a little bit more information and
Yeah.
details. But it does seem like they are shifting to the young are inheriting a society they never expected to inherit.
Yeah.
They expected the elders to be in power forever and that they were always going to be the underlings, but now it's kind of being forced upon them with, hey, the elders are dying off. They're, disappearing. They're, and what is the world going to do with this? Especially since you do have these anarchs who are now seeing an opportunity to seize control and power, or to at least change the way of thinking. How is the Camarilla going to uphold that, and how are they going to stand strong in the face of that?
Yeah.
So I think that is an interesting direction. I think that they are putting a lot of emphasis on Thin Bloods. One of the big announcements about Bloodlines 2 is that it's going to be a Thin Blood story, that Thin Bloods are going to play a very important part in it. Obviously, they've fleshed out Thin Bloods more than ever before in 5th edition. So they're
Yeah.
clearly looking towards that as a very important direction that they're going in. But also with the Caitiff, with, these the bloodlines are starting to become a lot more vague and foggy. Cult of the Blood Gods did still give us the definitions between the different Hekata bloodlines, but they've really pushed a lot of the others off into, ill-defined space. So I think that it is an interesting direction. Salubri being brought back in officially, which has not been done since Dark Ages. They have not talked about the Salubri since Dark Ages, really.
It's a
Um,
weird one, right? Because we call it the 14th clan, but there are 10 of them in the world.
yeah,
Um, which is a bit weird. What I hope they explain in the future, what I hope they'll do for the game, what I think will be good for the game is they kind of explain the beckoning.
yep,
They tell us who's still left standing.
yep,
Because I want the elders to be around. I don't want a world of 12th generation vampires and above. I think that will be very boring.
yeah,
I want the Sabbat to be kind of small terrorist cells, more loosely based, which makes them even more scary. I want the return of the Bali uh,
okay. That's a
as
big.
as an alternative foe to the Sabbat.
Hmm.
I think the Bali represent everything that the road of humanity tries not to be,
Yeah,
even more than the Sabbat.
yeah. Oh, for
Because
sure, more than the
yeah,
Sabbat. Absolutely, absolutely.
Bali is you take a ministry and you turn them up by 1,000 when it comes to depravity and luring people. I want that back. I want Bali,
Yeah,
because we only have house rules, and I think the Daimonium you could easily make that Oblivion. By
yeah,
the way, uh, I want some of the less known, or maybe not less known, but some of the bloodlines that are kind of moving in the background. I would like a system for True Bruja, for example.
yeah,
I made my own house rules for it, which is perfectly fine. And I don't mean that you need to make rules for everything, that in the sense that the players can do this, because I think some of
right,
you're not meant to play Bali, you're not meant to play True Bruja, and
right.
I totally agree with that. But I would like some.
More storyteller resources, more
Yeah.
options to fiddle with, and more mechanics to fiddle with for storytellers. I
And
absolutely agree.
kind of lore wise, after the beckoning is done and people are in factions and everything, I would like to see another War of the Princes. I would like to see the world go nuts, and it's like every city against every city, and the Camarilla Anarchs are bad. Nothing matters anymore.
Yeah,
It's just like who can control the tallest building in whatever town you're in. I think that will be fun.
Well, on top of the elders of Who's Left Standing, I'd love to see more of a light shine on the Methuselahs again. Because really, the Methuselahs are the ones that are making the beckoning, making Gehenna happen to a certain degree.
Yeah,
And so knowing like who's involved still, who are the players that are still on the field, like we're given reason to believe Menelae's gone, but Helena's still around, that she fought the beckoning by slaughtering a bunch of Banu Hakim. You know, that there are these players that they set into play in the older editions. Getting some updates about those characters would be really, really nice. They don't need to go too crazy with it, but just saying like a where are they now? Who's still
yeah.
on the field? Who's still on the board right now? Where's Jeremy McNeil? Nobody knows. They've never told us. It's all been rumor and myth and legend, but like just a little bit of an update to the meta plot would be really nice. Do people need to use it? No, they can do whatever they want. We've always known that about TTRPGs. It's always up
Yeah.
to your interpretation and what you choose to use. But for those of us who've been fans of the meta plot, who have followed along the stories of these characters, some closure or some continuation would be really nice to see. It'd just be really nice to get an update on like what's Victoria Ash's deal? Did she go off to the beckoning? Like what's going on in Chicago? You know, is Loden still alive? Because some say he is, some say he's not. Like,
I don't. It's I never address the beckoning in my games because I think it's kind of silly. It raises sort of too many questions and answers none, and it's inconsistent. Like, why does Isaac get pulled and
yep,
Mithras does not?
yep,
It's like it's a weird thing, and I know exactly why they did it.
yeah,
But in game, it makes no sense. So I
absolutely,
would like to have them explain it, and it could be as easily as there was one antediluvian sleeping there,
yep,
and they have found him. Maybe someone died or something, but then now it's over.
yeah,
He killed like 100 of these elders from the world, felt satisfied, went to bed again.
yep.
I don't need more than that. I
Or
just
like just the definition of it's certain bloodlines.
yeah,
Descendants of a certain bloodline are called,
yeah.
whereas other bloodlines are not. So maybe Mithras's bloodline was fine, but maybe Helena was
or
supposedly
or,
called to the beckoning, but then
or a thing
resisted.
where if your blood is like, let's say you have a blood potency of 3, then you are worthy to be summoned, but
Yep,
then you go above maybe 6, and then it can no longer.
yeah,
Like the pole, you're too strong for the pole to actually affect you. I
yep,
think that would make kind of sense mechanically, at least, to just
yeah,
to throw a bit of numbers on him, because that would explain why Isaac, who's and silly as far as I remember, he's not an elder, gets pulled, but Mithras like, nah, I have blood potency
yeah.
9.
I'm too strong
I'm
for this.
yeah,
Yeah,
and
yeah, exactly.
the whole council, nobody knows who they are, and I think that's fine. But the Camarilla Shadow Council, they're not leaving for the Middle East, right?
Hopefully, I mean, it's assumed that they don't, but yeah, like an updated register of Justicars, an
Hmm.
updated inner circle. Like, just give us some answers to help us, those of us who care about these things. Obviously, I've talked to plenty of storytellers who are like, I don't care, I just do my own thing, which is
Yeah,
fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But
yeah.
there are
Take
those of
take what you
us,
use.
yeah, there are those of us who have followed along since the 90s who I think would love to at least know what their thoughts are on it, whether we use it or not, at least what they think is going on, because lore was such an intrinsic part of the
I just
original game.
I don't want them to have written themselves into a corner. I don't want it to be the I don't know if it's prevalent anymore, but I know in past times there was a bit of politics in the company that kind of
Yeah.
people are not talking together.
Yep.
So,
And
but
it seems like they've ironed that out now. But it also seems that a lot of the old guard is gone. A lot of
yeah,
people have moved on. Justin Achille is no longer involved. A lot of the people who were core figures about it
hmm,
are gone now. So if they are all on the same page now, get it figured out. Tell us what's
yeah.
going on. Get us caught up because, we don't want to fall
And again,
behind.
just
Yeah.
leave it ambiguous. But like you have talked about a beckoning. That's a major thing.
Yeah.
The Inquisition is a major thing. The
Yep.
Ashira is a major thing. So you have to follow through. You have to involve all these things, and you have also like the Sabbat, they're spearheading this Gehenna War, as they call it. So you have to do something with it, and all the things that you forgot about, you
Yeah.
have to mention it. You have to say like a sentence or two about the barley. You can't just pretend they never existed, because
Yeah.
they're there 100%.
Yeah, you've already established that they're a thing.
Yeah,
Like, if the Salubri are coming back, why? If it's
yeah.
not 10 anymore, which it would make sense after the fall of Vienna, after the Tremere have suffered terrible, devastating losses, their infrastructure is shattered, it would make sense for the Salubri to be like, now's our time, let's repopulate and let's get revenge. Like,
I would actually
okay.
love as a story thing where Salot he kind of regains control
Mm-hmm.
and the Tremere lose clan status. I think that would be
It
fun.
would be amazing. It would be such a cool
Um,
story.
to see the Salubri kind of, I don't think they would mass embrace because they're Salubri,
No,
but
it'd still be deliberate, but it would
uh,
make sense that now they see an opportunity. Now they're not as easily,
and that's what I mean with
outnumbered.
the going into the War of Princes, because the Camarilla would have to kick the Tremere out.
Yep.
They're not welcome in a lot of places in the world. Some places they're high clans, some places they're low clans. And I think it would be fun to go back to the Dark Age kind of mentality, because we have the Inquisition
Yeah.
already there. So we can have a war of princes or a war of clans or a war of cities. But like take the Camarilla and use that as or Anarchs or Sabbat, use that as that's your political philosophy, but you will still see Camarilla City against Camarilla City and all that. I think that would be a very fun toy chest
Well,
to
and there's
play with.
enough crazy real life stuff happening in our modern world to be a good blueprint to
Mm,
illustrate all of that. If they took some of the more current events, the political struggles that are happening in America, the unrest happening in Europe and the Middle East, like there's a lot there that they could use as kind of like a placemat to build upon this struggle that you're talking about. I think the stage is set. They just need to commit and
yeah.
decide this is the direction they're going in and really lean in. But I think there's no better time or opportunity than the current status of things in the world to launch into a story like that. So as we're getting near the end here, I want to do kind of a lightning round of questions because we've had so much, and I want to follow up with you, especially closer to the release of Dusktown.
Yeah.
I would love to have a recheck in there, but I want to go through these lightning round questions, and then we'll put a bow on this thing for tonight. But uh, Mimic Rebecca submitted several questions, so I want to give her her moment in the spotlight to answer these questions because a lot of them do pertain to the game that she played in. I know that that either wrapped up or is wrapping up, and I think she'd love to hear some insights about it post the game. But the first thing she asks,
Furious Norse.
yeah, the first thing she asks is why did you choose Fall of London? You kind of discussed that. Which playthrough was your favorite? The Cam, Anarch, or Autarchus one?
It's like choosing a child. You can't
Right?
do that. I mean, it's different stories, different people. I think they had very good moments, all of them. Uh, each a springboard to the next. It's
They
it's
do kind
one
of flow from one to the next to the
it's
next.
one big thing in my head.
So it's all your
Uh,
favorite because they all intertwined like that. That makes
it's
sense.
I mean, it's my London by Night, so it's all the same in my head.
Yeah.
I thought, but yeah, all my groups are amazing. I have been very fortunate with my players because not a lot of storytellers are. You will have murder hobos and weird shit and all kind of weird discussions to have, but I have been very fortunate. So all of my games have been running very smoothly.
That's fantastic. That's all you can ask for as a storyteller.
Yeah.
Her next question is: what were some of the secrets from your most recent Anarch game that players or viewers didn't know, or maybe still don't know?
Um, trying to think of. I mean, obviously, the Cult of Mithras was pulling everything in the background while, like, it's just playing people out against each other. Emery was very involved in that because she became the kind of spy, place your USB thing and everything, and to the world she was working with the Nos, but in reality she was working for the cult of Mithras. I think it's very apparent to people that Bruja Justicar is true Bruja because they can manipulate time.
Right.
But it is a secret, and nobody really talks about it. It was mentioned, the Bali thing with the prince. Again, not really a secret, it's just rumoring. I mean, I had things in the story that we never addressed or got to. It's not really a secret, but it's just it never happened.
Right.
I can't think of anything that didn't unravel. I mean, they with the Sabbat, they didn't care about the villain speech, so it didn't give that, and they never figure out who this guy is. They just let's just fucking kill him. But that's players, right? They can make that choice.
Oh, absolutely, and that's why we do it. Again, that
Yeah.
unpredictability is why we do it. We love that they can completely throw us off in that regard, and have us have to replan and react and go into a different direction. Was there a specific decision that happened in that game that was like a linchpin decision that really changed the course of the game? Whether it involved Emery or not, was there a moment that really like set the course for you or changed the course for you in that game?
Yeah. Actually, when they decided to kill the warlock, because it was supposed to end with the Sabbat, but it ended with the warlock.
Wow. Okay.
So yeah. But it was just supposed to be that annoying Camarilla, like I'm the boss of you kind of character, right? But they took it really hard, and the whole chronicle, they were like, we're gonna get this fucking guy. So they made it their mission. So I made it my mission to write it into the story, a way that they could achieve this.
What is your favorite clan of all the clans?
It's Bruja, definitely.
What?
um,
Okay.
I mean, I love the Ban Hakim, and Tremere as well, for different reasons.
Yeah.
I
It's
mean,
hard to pick one, right? Like there's so much to like about various clans that like saying that one is your favorite. It's like, well, but there's also this stuff I like about this one and this one. But
I think it's easier for me to say what I wouldn't play.
well,
I mean,
that was going to be my next question. What
I,
clans do you just outright avoid?
I mean, I love Ventru for SPCs, but I don't think I will ever play a Ventru. Um, Staying with Ministry, Ministry is very hard for me to wrap my head around. They have cool disciplines, but and that's going to become a challenge in the next game. I have a very hard time of getting into the mindset of a Ministry.
Mm-hmm.
Malkavian is
Complicated.
another. Yeah, Malkavian is another one I want to avoid because I just feel like I would go through past trauma trying to uh, play the derangement.
Mm-hmm.
I use Malkavians a lot more. I mean, I had Josh, who's a fucking fan favorite, Malkavian in London, who's just his thing is he does not have internal thoughts. So when he thinks, he narrates in a noir kind of style.
That's amazing.
But I thought that was just, and the next one is just like giving them small ticks. Like she's gonna be breaking the fourth wall. It's just like a weird idea, but I don't think if I wanted to play like a serious Malkavian and actually like I would have to pull on something I know.
There's a
Like
lot to go into to do it justice, and
I
it's
mean,
it's
if let's say I wanted to play a Malkavian with PTSD, I think I would be kind of offending people with PTSD because they don't know what it feels like. So I would have to go
right.
into like stress or anxiety and some shit like that. And those are not particular. I got rid of that. I don't
Yeah.
want to. I don't want to bring
You're
it back
trying to
into my life.
escape from
Yeah,
that with TTRPGs, not
yeah.
indulge in it fully. That
And
absolutely makes sense.
I don't want to play a Fishmonk or a Harlequin either. So I think
Right.
Ventru Ministry and Malkavian are probably the ones I would have the hardest time playing. As a player, as a SPC, it's fine. I can do a lot with them.
So vampire is clearly your favorite splat of all the splats in the World of Darkness. That seems to be the one that you really, really sink your teeth into, pun intended.
Yeah.
But if you were to venture outside of vampire and try another splat or another setting, which one of the ones available or the ones that could be available appeals to you most? If you were going to actually step outside of vampire and run a game that was not vampire, which one do you think you'd want to run?
As a player or a GM,
Why not both?
I would love to play in a Wraith. I would not like to run it though, because that's very serious
It
and
is very serious.
we have to abuse each other. But I think that would be fun. I've gotten into. I don't know a lot about it. There's so much Wraith lore, but I'm trying to learn a lot. But it's not as accessible as the other
Right.
things. I would love to run a mage or a demon story.
Okay.
I have almost no knowledge about it, other than what I have the vampire perspective on it. Let's say that. But
But to get the other side of the coin, to see it from the eyes of the mages or the
yeah.
demons, would be very
Um,
interesting.
Werewolf does not resonate with me.
Okay.
The whole protect the planet and all that is, again, it's very real and we should do that, but it's, I don't know, it does not.
Doesn't scratch that itch for you in the
No, yeah,
storytelling. Right.
it's too much of a being a good guy, and Changeling is just fucking weird. It's just that's just medieval fairy tales from Europe in my
Yeah.
head. It's so weird. And I'm trying to bring a Changeling into the next story, but again, it's a weird world. So definitely Wraith, Demon, and Mage, I think would be fun.
Okay. Okay. Um, well, obviously, you may get your wish because it seems like with the direction that things are going in terms of releases, I think Mage is probably up next. Although I really hope that they take their time with it because they've done a really good job of balancing the systems up until now, which is a first for them. If you
Yeah.
go back to 20th anniversary or any of the old editions, they were not balanced at all. You could not run a werewolf and a vampire in the same game.
No,
You
no,
could
no.
SPC a werewolf, but you couldn't run a werewolf with their mechanics in the game. So it does seem like Mage is next. I hope that they're ready for it. I hope they don't just release something ad hoc that is off kilter, but that does seem to be next. But I personally would love to see Wraith next. I'm a big fan of Wraith. I would love, and it makes sense with the way they've been releasing things. They have a major release like Vampire, followed by one of the smaller releases like Hunter, followed by another big release like Werewolf. It would only make sense that they do a bridge between that with another
I
release like Changeling or Wraith.
I actually think they should save Wraith or save Mage for last.
I agree.
That's the way I would do it. I would do Wraith next, then I would do Demon, then I would do Changeling, and then I would do Mage.
That makes sense to me. Yeah.
In that order, because Mage is about reality.
Mm-hmm.
And to understand that, you have to understand all of reality, which means all the systems.
Yeah,
And
having
then you
everything
have
fleshed out.
to and then you have to put on that lens of Mage.
And they've done some great experimenting mechanics wise with the gifts in Werewolf. I'm the primary werewolf storyteller here, so I've gotten really into Werewolf, but they've done some experimenting as to how mechanically they could do it. But I think that Changeling and Wraith both could be an opportunity to further experiment, to try some things that won't be as world breaking or bending as what Mage can do or what people are expecting of Mage. So I agree with you entirely. I think that pushing Mage to last, much to the dismay of all the
I
Mage
just
lovers in our community, I think it makes the most sense to give it all of the time in the world to get it down right rather than,
because
yeah.
you kind of have to. We've established what is vampire. We have established the what is werewolf, and they're like the Umbra, and they have different levels. And
Yeah.
vampire, they have the Oblivion, the Abyss, and all that. And that's the same with Changeling and Demon and Wraith, to establish those worlds, because Mage delves into all of it.
Yeah.
And that's why I think for the cosmology of it all, I think it makes a lot of sense to save Mage
Absolutely.
until you have fleshed out, or at least have a core book for uh, the rest of the supernaturals. I would not do things like, unless you're really ambitious, you could probably like have a side chapter in Wraith about mummies and zombies and playing those kind of undead. Again,
Right.
if anyone out there is a big fan of those. Just I'm ignorant about it. That's why I'm saying it. But to me, it does not seem like the most popular ones.
Well,
I
we
know
even
mommy.
have a
I know
community
mommy's out
member who
there.
loves Promethean,
Yeah,
which is basically Frankenstein.
yeah.
And that, that's I've never dabbled in that. I've never even experimented with that, but yeah, it would make sense to release just one splat book that kind of composes elements of all of those and make it like the Greater Undead book or the, Mythical Monsters book or something that does without making them their own systems, because I do not believe they would need their own splats or books. I think at that point you're just money fishing.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that it wouldn't hurt to do it that way. But yeah, I agree. Mage should be last. I couldn't agree more. I know that people are asking for it, wanting it, but I'd rather that they take
I
the time and
mean,
do it right.
my name is the SanguineWizard. I would love nothing more than to play Wraith, or not Wraith, but Mage. It's
Yeah.
but I mean, I'd rather have them do it right.
And if it's at the
It's,
detriment of everything else, if it means that they release a terrible system that ends up killing the world of darkness, what good is that in the long run? Like, do something, make people wait, make people patient, and release something fantastic and amazing that fits and does everything right, then release something terrible and risk sinking the entire ship,
yeah.
just because people are pressuring you to get it out. So, last thoughts. What advice would you give to people who want to become a storyteller?
Red thread, beginning, end, at least the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
Don't break your own rules. If you say something is there, then it's kind of like, again, don't write yourself into a corner. People are smart; they will know it. Accept you will make a lot of mistakes. Accept that you will forget things all the time. Be transparent with your players, always, about things you can be transparent about. Don't spoil the story for them, but just before let them make informed decisions, and be ready to always change.
Fantastic. Well,
It's interactive.
yeah. Thank you so much for taking the time with me today. For those who don't know, we pre-recorded this at 5 a.m. Eastern, but I'm so happy that we did it. This was a wonderful conversation, and I feel like we could still continue to go on for hours to come because I love talking about this stuff, and clearly so do you.
Yeah,
So I
yeah.
really do appreciate that you took the time to do this, and we definitely have to check in again either shortly before the Dusktown Chronicle starts or after it started. We can do a check-in off that, but it was wonderful having you as a guest. I want to encourage everyone to head on over to YouTube and give a subscription to the SanguineWizard. Go watch London by Night. We've talked in great lengths about it, but get yourself hyped and excited for Dusktown by watching London by Night. It'll give you a really good, strong sense of our dear guests' storytelling and the style of game that you can expect, as well as some new and exciting changes with this new game. But go give them a subscription. Let's support one another in this community and build it up so that we can have the world of darkness around for a long, long time to come. But thank you so
Thank,
much for being here. I can't thank you enough. This was a wonderful chat, a wonderful opportunity, and a great watch for anybody who takes the opportunity to do so.
thank you so much for having me and for all the kind words. It's been a
Absolutely.
pleasure. I feel like we could do this for 4 more hours, but you have
Right?
to sleep.
We'll have to come back around to it again in the future. But go follow the SanguineWizard and go follow St. Pete by Night on all the social media listed down below. We have our regular shows airing this week. We will not have an After Dark next week as I will be off at Gen Con running games for Renegade. So there will be no After Dark next week, but we'll be back the week after with resuming our programming. But this was a great note to go on break from. Thank you so much for being my guest, and thank you all so much for watching. We couldn't do it without you, and have a good evening, everyone. Bye bye.
Bye.